Hello and welcome to On the Spot. My name is Mona Davids, and I am the founder of Little African News, New York Voice News, as well as the host of Real Talk with Mona David. I'm so happy to have our panel of guests to discuss the recent mayoral primary as well as the results of the unofficial results of the ranked choice voting. So we're just going to go around, introduce our guests, our panel of guests, and then we're going to dive right into this discussion because I'm sure we all have a lot to say. So we'll start first with Yatin. Please introduce yourself.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mona, for having me on. Yatin Chu, I'm the president of Asian Wave Alliance.
Thank you, Yatin. And Maria?
Hi. Thank you, Mona, for putting this together again. And nice to see Yatin and Michael. I'm Maria D'Angelo. I'm Executive Director of One City Rising. I'm a former City Council candidate and New York State Senate candidate and have been involved in this race for the last couple of months. So looking forward to talking.
Thank you. And last but not least, Michael.
Benjamin. My day job is as a associate editorial board member or writer at the New York Post. My other spare time, I'm online on Twitter, X, Square Peg Dem, and opining on everything from politics to Marvel movies to the WNBA. And I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion. Also, I always forget, I'm a former Bronx Assemblyman, 2003 to 2010.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, you do always forget that, and I don't understand how you forget that because you passed some significant legislation in the assembly, and especially when it comes to the African community as well, and of course, for New Yorkers. So I want to get started. Okay, so we got the unofficial results of the mayoral primary. Zoran Kwame Mamdani did exceedingly well. I think he's 56% of the votes of the total ranked choice voting tally, and Andrew Cuomo is at 44%. And the total number of voters, of registered Democratic voters, is about maybe 10%. The ones who voted is about 10% of the total registered Democratic voters. So, I mean, I'm curious, what are you guys' thoughts on the turnout of Democratic voters for this primary? So I'll start first with Michael.
I think, the Mamdani campaign did what every such a campaign is supposed to do. Supposed to bring new voters to the polls, and they did that in droves. And they had, I think, turnout with like 1 million voters in the primary, which hadn't been done since David Dinkins won his primary in 1989. And I think David was able to win because he ran against an incumbent, Ed Koch, and he brought new voters to the poll who were excited by him. But the real antecedent to Dinkins was the Jesse Jackson campaign in '88, which then led to the organizing around David Dinkins and his victory over Ed Koch in that year's primary. There was no antecedent election for Mr. Mamdani, other than the fact that what's his name, President Trump got reelected to the presidency, and that stirred up a lot of angst among Democrats, and that probably helped to drive people who may not have been interested in voting, but voting in this primary because everybody was saying how much they were going to oppose and fight Donald Trump's agenda, and then you had Mr. Mamdani promising socialism, free buses, not quite free cheese, but government-run grocery stores, essentially, promising honey for everybody if they elected him to office. And they were excited. They were interested. That's what they wanted. They wanted, their handouts. I see some analysis that young white college-educated voters voted for him because they're burdened by their college debt, and ordinary Democrats aren't doing anything to help relieve them of their debt, which seems like a rather selfish motive to vote for somebody. And then, of course, because of which is good, the identity politics. People who hadn't been seen themselves running for a major office in New York City before. South Asians, Muslims, Africans, and others, felt inspired by the Mamdani campaign, and they turned out, to essentially, to help to elect one of their own. I think it's interesting that the only two boroughs that Andrew Cuomo won was the Bronx, which is heavily Hispanic, and Staten Island, which is not heavily minority. Quite possibly, maybe I don't know the exact numbers of the Staten Island Democrats who vote. Who has a greater percent, whether or not minority African Americans, Black people, and Hispanics have a greater voice in that party in Staten Island in Democratic primaries. But it was fascinating that he wasn't able to grow or at least to win in his home borough of Queens, where he and his family made their name. That was quite fascinating. And as an old-time Democrat from the 80s and 90s, I'm just flabbergasted that the Cuomo campaign ran a late 20th century campaign for mayor. It seemed he wanted to coast on his name. It seemed that the labor unions that were out there for him, who pulled out members for their union hall rallies, did a very poor job when it came to pulling out those same voters on primary day. A friend of mine who was running for city council here in the Bronx, he complained that the heat kept many of his voters home, particularly the Hispanic elderly and others who just didn't want to come out in the heat to cast their votes. So when you have all that in combination with the enthusiasm around the Mamdani campaign by his voters, it was clear that Cuomo and the others were going to have a hard time defeating him. And one last point I wanted to make: I was surprised by how poorly Scott Stringer performed and how poorly Adrian Adams performed. I think those were keys. When we looked at the ranked choice voting, it was over in 3 rounds because everybody did so poorly that by round 3, Mr. Mamdani accumulated 56% of the votes cast for himself, while Cuomo struggled to go from 38%, 35% in the first round to finish at 44%. I mean, I think, in the first round, 60% of voters voted anybody other than Cuomo. And to me, that's a signal that he is not wanted. He's going to claim, yes, it was a left segment of the electorate. That's the electorate you knew you were running for when you ran for mayor. So don't suddenly tell us, well, these aren't my voters. Well, then why are you running in the primary if you knew your voters weren't going to be there?
No, you make some very valid points when it comes to turnout. And one of the things that you mentioned is the young white voters that came out for Zoran. And when we look at it, whether it's in Brooklyn, Brownstone, Brooklyn, Greenspoint, Williamsburg, when we look at Queens as well, excuse me, the Upper West Side, these are mostly white, affluent voters that came out to vote for him. And I think that there needs to be a further discussion when it comes to this segment of the population, or what I would call the so-called woke, progressive, DSA segment of the population, because most of them are young, white, affluent. Many of them are not from New York City. They transplants. A lot of them are still being funded and supported by their parents, even though they're adults. But when we look at, Adrian Adams's numbers, where some of her votes came in, Cuomo, you'll see that when it comes to Black voters didn't come out for Zoran. And I think that's a broader discussion about the engagement the engagement of the Black community, whether they're Africans, Black Americans, West Indians, Afro-Latinos, and Zoran and his campaign. But speaking of the Upper West Side, Maria, you're on the Upper West Side, and you're in Zoran land.
Yeah. So just, I am on the Upper West Side. The Zoran did not carry District 6, which is my district. Cuomo actually won that district, which was surprising to me. I do want to point out that Mark Levine, who was declared the winner of the controller's race today, got 58% of the vote versus 41% for Justin Brannan, who really ran with Zoran. So I wonder, as we dig more into these numbers, if there really is a mandate here for a socialist mayor, even from the 5% who voted for Zoran. And I'm wondering that this was so much more a referendum on the good job the campaign did in saying anyone but Cuomo. There's no anyone but Levine in the Levine race. And he was running on a platform that probably was very similar to Cuomo's platform. I mean, some people might disagree with that, but they're pretty closely aligned. And Cuomo was pretty much aligned with pretty much the entire Democratic field. I mean, he brought us bail reform, and I could keep going, change race age, all of the reforms that the liberal left have brought over the last few years. So I think from looking at the Upper West Side, I'm not viewing this as Mondami land. I do want to say I see a lot of young people around New York City, and I think there's plenty of room for a centrist Democrat candidate to reach young people. I think this Mondami vote was a very strong message from a lot of disgruntled youth, and I think it's important that we hear them and acknowledge that there is a dissatisfaction among young people and a lot of fear about their futures, about affordability, and things like that. And those things have to get addressed. But at the same time, we can't have a mayor with no work experience and who has a serious history of very divisive politics and very divisive statements that he made that alienated large swaths of people in New York. He is not a candidate to unite. He's a candidate to divide and its record in the assembly. And I definitely want to hear what Michael thinks of that. But digging into his record, he's only passed 3 bills in 2 terms, which is very low. And the word is he didn't really have much of a work ethic there, and that he was quite divisive, and really people were not happy with his extreme positions. So I think there's a lot of messages here. In fact, that he did manage to squeeze. I don't see his win as a mandate. I don't see it as a big statement on the direction of the country or the city or that they vibe with. I don't see any of that. What I see is a moment when people were anyone but Cuomo, and Brad Leader got arrested by Trump. There's a lot of anti-Trump sentiment, and then we've got the whole anti-Semitism issue. I think as much as Zoran likes to say that he's not an anti-Semite, and we're even seeing a lot of mainstream media pick up on the idea, like he's not said anything very specific that's anti-Semitic. The fact is that his entire adult life, he's been campaigning against the state of Israel. And, he could say, I've never said I don't like Jews, but I think that's splitting hairs. And I think that the vast majority of people in the Jewish community, I live in one of the perhaps the most Jewish neighborhood in the city, do view his positions and statements as deeply anti-Semitic. And I think that's a very alienating posture. And then one other point I want to make is that I think that the media in the last couple of days has been extremely disappointing. Uh, uh, they have really been trying to turn this into a momentum for Zoran, that this is inevitable, that he's going to win in November. There's nothing we can do about it. Just go with it. We have a op-ed from uh, various leaders. We have a number of Democratic officials saying they want to work with him. But there's a big difference between winning 5% of New York voters at a moment when there was extreme anger over certain issues and actually representing an entire city. And that's what we expect our mayor to do. We don't want a mayor that's representing 5% of fringe voters. We want a mayor who's going to be a mainstream representative of a wide range of communities. And with that said, I think it's great to have a Muslim candidate do as well as he did, but I'm concerned that he wasn't exactly clear about his values, which may in fact not be consistent with the mainstream Muslim community, which I think Mona could probably address in more detail. If I was Muslim, I would not be happy to have him representing us, just like, as somebody who's, part mostly Italian, I would not be represented by some people who have views that are very different from my own, just because they're the same ethnic group as I am. So I think there's a lot in to unpack as we get into the details and the data.
Thank you, Maria. Yatin, we keep on hearing that the Asian community came out for Zoran. Zoran is South Asian, Ugandan-born South Asian, but he is South Asian. And just looking at the data, the preliminary data that we have from the Board of Elections, looking at the districts, when they say Asian community, is it South Asian? Is it East Asian? Because the Asian community is a pretty large umbrella. You could be from Japan or you could be from Bangladesh, and you're still under that Asian umbrella. So I'm just curious, what's your take on this primary, and what's your take on the quote unquote Asian votes and the different constituencies of the Asian community?
Yeah, thanks, Mona. That's a really good question, and one that's been raised since the early voting and certainly the election night. As you've described, the Asian community in New York City is it's a catch-all for so many different nationalities and cultures, right, and religions underneath all of that. The largest is the Chinese community. There's about 800,000 residents, and a really large part of New York City is the Chinese community. But we also have a very significant South Asian community comprised of Indian, Bangladeshi, and Pakistani. And those groups, the Desis, as sometimes referred to, is about half of the number of Chinese. And then you have other East Asian, like Korean Chinese, mostly in Queens. So while we can't really see what ethnicity voted for who, we kind of are making those assumptions based on where in New York City, what neighborhoods did Cuomo win, or did Mamdani win? So I would say in where I am, which is Eastern Queens, they did mostly vote for Cuomo. I think where we see it come through, it's just the turnout was very low. The turnout for some of the districts that voted for Cuomo was just a lower turnout than the districts that voted very strong and higher volumes for Mamdani. So specifically for the Asians, I want to say the Chinese, which is the largest group, In Eastern Queens, mostly Cuomo, that's Chinese and Korean. When you go down to Hillside and Jamaica, there is that whole strip that you can see that lit up for Memdani. And having ran in state Senate District 17, and that area was part of, you know, the district that I ran, I'm very familiar with that. And there are many Indians in Flora Park, in in Flora Park, in Belrose, down Hillside, into, so that community definitely came out for Memdani. So absolutely South Asian. As we move to Brooklyn, we see South Brooklyn again, heavily Chinese, but also mixed in with the Chinese community in Bensonhurst and Gravesend and Bath Beach. You have then to the north of it, you have Kensington. So Kensington is a large Bangladeshi community that is part of Senate District 17, which is actually just elected a Republican senator, interestingly, because it's a mix. But we're talking about the primary, so we're talking about registered Democrats.
Yes.
But in there is also a large Muslim community. When I was living there, Egyptians and probably other national, you know, in the north, Bay Ridge is a lot of Palestinians. That's, you know, certainly different. But you know, you just, it's really hard to describe. And I want to go back to the fact that the largest surge we saw that have voted for the first time in a primary are not just the South Asians that I've been talking about, but also the younger voters, the 18 to 40-year-old. There's like sort of three age groups that the New York Times looked into, and those age groups popped. And those age groups span across all different races. So I don't think it's just the white voters that we were talking about. I do believe that in that youth vote, younger vote, not really youth, but you know, up to probably 35, 40, are Asian voters, are probably Black voters and Hispanic voters that very much, you know, liked his vibe, liked the way that he communicated. They He was very prominent on social media, which is really the primary way in which they're getting their information. And as all of you know, the biggest hurdle in running for office is getting your name out there, right? Being the brand. And he was able to do that very successfully with this younger group, in the way that he talked to people and the videos that he made. And he ran a super successful, energetic campaign, and I have to give him credit for that.
Yes, no, I agree with you with a lot of the points that you're making, and looking at that demographic, not so much the 18 to 24-year-olds, but it's the 24 to I think 30-year-olds, who, you know, whose numbers increased the most. And the New York Times actually had to correct their graphic, because at first they had it 18 to 24-year-olds that had, you know, surpassed that 100,000 person mark, but they updated it and they issued a correction, and it's really the 24 to 30-year-olds. Which brings me to my question. And Michael, I'd like you to, you know, share your thoughts on it. So Zoran has registered, you know, we've had a whole bunch of new voters, young voters. Uh, is there a plateau? I mean, now we know how many voters he has, how many votes he got. And it's still a very, very, very small percentage of registered Democratic voters. Going into the general election, where we're going to have Democrats, Republicans, independents, conservatives voting. You know, we have the Working Families Party that, you know, Zoran will probably be on, but we also have independent candidates. We have Eric Adams running as an independent candidate. Andrew Cuomo running as an independent candidate, Jim Walden running as an independent candidate, Irene Estrada running as the Conservative Party candidate, Curtis Lewer running as the Republican candidate. Is that momentum, or these new, how are these new voters going to help him, reach that plurality come November? And Curtis is starting with, he's 27%. So, okay, we'll be conservative, we'll say 25%, but Curtis does have a following. And so does Eric Adams. And so does Andrew Cuomo. So I know it's a whole bunch of questions in one question, but has he plateaued? Is there room? And let's not also forget about Curtis Lewer, because Curtis is coming with his base.
I wouldn't say that Mamdani has plateaued. There is the bandwagon effect among voters. They see his success, and those who are inclined to voting come November may be inclined to vote for him. You have his young people who voted for him. They're going to tell their friends, "See, I told you that the guy I was voting for, that Mamdani guy, he won. I need you to come out in November to help elect him." So you're going to have that continuing. And Mamdani has been on a on a tour. He hasn't taken a victory lap. He's actually been looking to expand his voter base. He visited Nan over the weekend. Um, he's holding meetings with other Democrats to talk about gaining their support. Although she's not in New York, the New York State Senate Majority Leader, Andrew Stewart Cousins, has said that she'll be supporting him in his run for mayor. She doesn't have a vote. She doesn't have a constituency in New York City, but she is a Democratic Party leader in the state. So having her support is another thing he can also count on. And that's going to also be a third party endorser who will make people who are considering him more comfortable. Curtis is coming in, yes, with a 25% Republican base, but when you have the two independent candidacies of possibly Andrew Cuomo and definitely Mayor Eric Adams, they're competing for some of that Republican vote as well. And it comes down to voters, making a choice. Do they stick with a Curtis on the Republican line, hope others join him on that, join his contingency so that he can win, or do they bet on Eric Adams winning a wider constituency and being able to defeat Mamdani come November? There aren't yet any polls that are showing that just yet. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I don't think Mamdani is going to stop campaigning this summer. He's going to campaign through the summer. I don't believe Andrew Cuomo has the energy to campaign through the summer. I know Eric is going to be campaigning through the summer. But Eric's I watched his news conference on the crime stats. It's good news, but it's boring as all get out. I'm sitting there listening, thinking, all right, so what does he put into a 6-word bumper sticker? That's what you have to think of. I mean, what's he going to put in a TikTok to show that crime is dropping under him? I joked on X. Is he going to get shorties for Adams? What is he going to do to compete with the hotties for Mamdani? I mean, he's got to figure something out. And right now, I don't see the message coming in now. They have some time to do it, and they'll be active. I know Curtis is an earnest campaigner. He's going to be out there as well, but he's competing. It's going to be a tough road to hoe for these, baby boomers, running for office. Because when you look at it, they're all. Curtis is like 70. Andrew Cuomo is about my age, 67. Eric is maybe 65 or so. He has the most energy. There's no doubt about that. But it's going to be these old guys and Walden running against this 33-year-old who seems to be everywhere at once. I mean, is Andrew going to risk a heart attack walking the length of Manhattan? Is he going to risk a heart attack trying to play ball at Rucker Park this summer? I mean, those are the things that you have to do to try to let people know you're still vigorous, that you're the guy, who still has the pizzazz, to win this thing. I mean, Eric thinks he's a, a hip hop artist. I mean, he'll do some rapping over the summer. He'll do that stuff. His "We Out This Summer." Like, really, we out? Is that where we're going? I mean, that's what he's headed for. I mean, that is going to be a very interesting. It's going to be a campaign where a lot of us who like to make jokes are going to be able to have some rich material. But in all seriousness, it can't just be an attack Zoran Mamdani. Yeah, go after his attacks, but you also got to put out your positive platform in digestible bits that the voters you want to attract to the polls will keep in mind and come out and vote for you. And I think the candidate who's able to do that most successfully will win in November. But it remains to be seen if it will be somebody other than, Mamdani. I mean, we're seeing all this hagiography around him. Every newspaper, every magazine, every online news site or news magazine or news blog is singing his praises. He's the second coming. He's the best thing since sliced bread. Butter won't melt in his mouth. That's the way they're presenting him. And anybody that speaks against him is some sort of an Islamophobe racist.
Yeah.
I mean, they even got Senator Gillibrand, who's probably the most milquetoast person I've ever come across. They got to apologize for using the word jihad in reference to him. But he can go around talking about globalizing the intifada. He can go around talking about from the river to the sea and say, oh, no, that's just about, liberation for the Palestinian people. It's nothing about killing Israelis or killing Jews. But yes, it is. It's about destroying their state. But she has to apologize for using the word jihad. All right, so I went out on X this evening as I'm on my commute home, and I talked about, who's going to go on a crusade, to stop the Saracen king of New York from sacking our city. I'm not going to apologize for it. It's not Islamophobic. These are words about people actually trying to take control, prevent their city from falling into the hands of a socialist who doesn't reflect the values of most New Yorkers. Yes, New Yorkers are suffering economically. Many are. But in actuality, there's very little that a mayor can do to change the economic situation of New Yorkers. No matter how many free groceries you give out, or whatever you do, free bus service, it's not going to change their work life. And to me, the economists who are going to be weighing in the next few months are going to point out a government grocery store in the South Bronx or Washington Heights or Harlem is going to hurt the immigrant owner of the bodega, the immigrant owner of a business nearby who can't compete with government's ability not to have to make a profit and to offer. I mean, on the other hand, they might survive because we know that socialist governments are great at creating shortages, or at least providing with stuff that you don't want to eat or wear. So maybe there is some room for some immigrant businesses to succeed as socialism fails. But I'll let the others, weigh in on this.
Thank you, Michael. You raised some really good points, and I think somewhere I saw on X, I think it was a New York Post article that came out with the United Bodegas Association raising their concerns about the city-funded grocery stores or city-funded supermarkets. But I want to ask Yatsen, what are your thoughts on the race? Do you think that the East Asian community is going to come out in November in the general? Because I know that a lot of the East Asian community have somewhat moved to the right. And the same thing with places like the Bronx. The Bronx moved quite a bit to the right, voting for President Trump. It was quite a big increase in voters for Trump. But with the East Asian community, with what we've been seeing happening, where do you think they're going to go? Looking at
I think for the East Asian, we don't want a Mamdani, a self-declared democratic socialist. who on both public safety, on education, isn't really aligned. And I want to touch upon, I think Michael covered a lot of whether Mamdani has, kind of plateaued, and I agree with him, he has not. As a matter of fact, the primary was at a place where college students, a group that did vote big for him, were already at home. Think about all the, and I don't want to give Mamdani any ideas, but I'm sure that they're a smart group. They're going to be doing it, so I'm just going to
Yes.
say it.
Yes.
I mean, think about all the college campuses of
Yes.
18 to 24-year-olds. They could easily get concentrations of students to come to sign up to register for the first time and to vote.
Yes.
And it wouldn't even be a cell. And we've heard that young people have been registering more as unaffiliated. They didn't really want to identify. The younger group don't. So that's appealing for a general election. Get them signed up. You don't even have to register as a Democrat or a Republican, and you get to vote for this cool Zoran guy, right? So he's going to be activating that. He's absolutely going to make sure that whoever voted for him in the primary are going to mail in their absentee if they're going away. I'm sure. I mean, they're a very organized campaign.
Yes.
All the things that we know as, what campaigns do, they will do. So I think there's room to grow. And I think whoever, is going to have the best campaign absolutely have to grow the voters. We cannot think that the November election is just going to be like what it was 4 years ago. This is going to be a completely different November. And whether it's Eric Adams or Curtis Sliwa or Cuomo, if he stays in campaigns, and Jim Walden, they need to go out and get new voters.
Yes.
There's no way they're going to be already. It's going to be divided among them, right? The ones that are going to come out and vote. He's going to add to that with new voters he's bringing in. So as we're looking at who to coalesce around, and that's really been the talk, is, how do we beat Zoran Mamdani in November, with him still growing, with the media adoring him still, right? And that's going to continue. He's getting all that earned media on top of everything else he's doing. And, who is the candidate? And I want to say Eric Adams, it has the energy. He to me will be able to kick into and he's been doing some more social media. He knows he has to be there. And I don't see eye to eye with a lot of his policies, but I think Eric is very likable. I think he's very likable. And that's going to appeal to people who are looking at, campaigns differently than we used to 10 years ago. Right? So the age, the energy, the ability to bring in new voters are all the things that we are looking at on top of where their where their policy stances are, as we're trying to really coalesce. And going back to the East Asian voters, as you said, we have moved right. And a lot of the East Asian voters didn't have a good showing, I want to say, in the primary, because some of them just don't want to register as Democrats. They've moved away from that. So we will have a stronger turnout in November, even among the more conservative voters that would have backed Sliwa, and they still may. But I'm already seeing that we don't want to divide our vote. The most important goal we have as a community is to make sure that we beat Mamdani in November. And therefore, we have to unite around someone who has the best shot.
Yes. No, I agree with you with the points that you're making. And no, I'm sure that they probably have their absentee ballot operation up and running, and they're going to be on the college campuses as soon as schools open in late August. registering them to vote here in New York City. It's coming. It's a given. And, there's like a noise in the background. I don't know who it
I'm
is.
sorry. I'll take care of that.
Oh, okay, that's you. Okay. Um, but yeah, it's going to be very interesting. And his campaign, it's well run. He's everywhere. Everywhere you see Zoran, you see him on social media. You see the videos. Uh, it's it's just it's quite something to behold.
I
But
want to
Maria,
add something, Mona, if I
yeah,
may.
yes,
I want to add something that maybe is a negative for Zoran. We brought up the Israeli Palestine. While it's not in New York, it is in New York, right? We as New Yorkers see the protests, the chaos. So while it is somewhere, it is here.
mhm,
Um, and so the policies that he wants to put out, one of the motivating things that I've witnessed as I've become more political in the last few years was around, starting out with the specialized high school. The fear of losing something is a
mhm,
big motivator. And
yeah,
I think if we didn't have a democratic socialist with the platform, with everything that Michael had mentioned in terms of the uh, um, you know, is wearing his anti-Zionism very out there. People are very scared. So whether it's about Israel, whether it's about maybe something happening to the specialized high school test,
mhm,
maybe it's about losing your home and thinking that this is a move toward communism. And if you were worried about property and tenant landlord, and we just lived through yesterday's, the rent stabilization board, uh, raise giving their recommendations, and Zoran Mamdani saying to freeze it. There are going to be pockets of people that fear his policies in terms of what it will do to their lives, to their financial, to their educational opportunities. And one thing I do see is that will energize voters. So while the young voters want, like, something to making things more affordable, which Michael already said, like, how much can he really do, right? How much of a
mhm.
dent can he really do? There are stakes in different groups of people in New York that will be activated to come out to vote against him. So that's the kind of plus side that I see if we don't want a democratic socialist for the next 4 years.
Yeah, no, those are very good points. And I New York City has the largest number of Jews outside of Israel, if I'm not mistaken, right? Right,
Yes.
Yes.
Maria, Michael? Yeah. So it's not something that he will be able to continue to stay out of. I'll put it that way. And I watched the NBC uh, interview over the weekend where the reporter was like trying to pin him down on globalize the intifada. And you know he's his reasons for not condemning globalize the intifada, it's only going to go so far. And I'll just give an example. Zoran is a Muslim. I'm a Muslim. Zoran is a Shia Muslim. I am a Sunni Muslim. And I hear him when he says, "Oh, he doesn't want to be the word police," right? I get it. I really, really get it. But you also need to be sensitive to other communities as well. And again, like I said, I am a Muslim. I understand what globalize the intifada means. Okay? And yes, globalize the intifada from the river to the sea, all of that, it is what it is. You know, they feel that way about Israel. They don't really want Israel on the map. I'm a Muslim. I'm like, it is what it is. And Zoran cannot continue to be like, well, it's, you know, it's what people are saying. It's, you know, no, no, at some point you need to say, well, this is not right. Even though you are Muslim, you need to be a representative or a future mayor if he wins, as we'll say, inshallah, and God willing, if he wins. Um, but you need to be a mayor for all New Yorkers. And when it comes to something like globalize the intifada, we all know what it means. So don't try to continue to gaslight us, because even us Muslims that are here, we're like, come on now, you know very well what it means. But those words matter. And I'll give you an example. In the Quran, in Arabic, sorry, in Arabic, the word for a black person is a kafir. Okay, you all know that if you're aware of that. Kafir is black person. Okay,
Yes.
kafir is black person. Kafir is kafir. In South Africa, where I'm originally from, that's what the white minority government called us. It's like it's the equivalent to niggers. So for me, as a Muslim, anyone that is another Muslim, or whether they're an Arab Muslim, a South Asian Muslim, I don't care. But do not refer to black people, even though you're speaking Arabic, or like you're saying something, whatever. Do not say the word kafir or kafir to me, and I'm a Muslim. So it's kind of like the same thing with this globalize the intifada. You know, words do matter, and the meaning of words matter, and how offensive some words are for some communities. Like, it doesn't it you need to recognize that. So I don't know what he's going to continue to do with this globalize the intifada, but I don't think that issue is going to go away anytime soon. um, and we'll see how long he can gaslight um, gaslight everyone on it. I wish him good luck on it, because, like I said, I'm Muslim. I know what the hell that means. I know what the river to the sea means, and so do many other people. We're not stupid.
Yeah, Mona, I was when he gave that excuse for use of the term, the intifada. I had the very same thought about kafir. I first learned of it when I was in college. It was a course on cultural personality. It was on Mahatma Gandhi, and if I'm not mistaken, what's his name? The British Prime Minister Winston
Mhm,
Churchill,
mhm.
when he was the British Foreign Secretary, he referred to him as that damn kafir, to Gandhi as that. And that's when I first learned the term. And I was going to raise it, as you're saying, in an ex post about would Mamdani just use kafir because it's just an Arabic word for for black,
He
or
wouldn't dare.
I know
He
he wouldn't. I was gonna put it. Then I decided not to. I'd let it go. It was a bit too esoteric for anybody to really understand where I was coming from. So I decided not to do it. But I think the point is, when it comes to the language, it's not going to be him who's going to have to keep saying, who's going to have to avoid it. His cheerleaders in the media are going to say he answered it. He was asked. He answered it over the summer. Enough already. The Jews from Mamdani. They're going to say the same thing. They're going to try to. They're going to be the voice to try to
yeah,
dampen anybody who raises that issue. So to go along with what Yatin is saying, the opposition is going to have to talk about the things that are harmful to New Yorkers,
yeah.
whether it's his interest in taking and closing the specialized high schools, at least getting rid of the exam and making them ordinary high schools, because that's going to resonate with not only the Chinese and Asian community, it's going to resonate among Pakistani and Bangladeshi families. It's
Yeah.
gonna resonate um, among the Russian families, because when I
Mhm.
went to to the pro SH to the pro Federalized High School rallies, those are people I saw who wanted to keep the exam. So I don't know how he's going to play this game of, you vote for me, I'm like you, but I want to limit the opportunities for your children, the very same opportunity that I had in going to Bronx Science. I want to prevent your kids from having this opportunity of going there too, because I think we have this equity issue, and we have to open the school up to many more kids rather than another way around. So I don't know how he's going to dance around that issue. The issues of economics for those families and small property owners who own small properties, who are also minorities, who are also naturalized citizens who are immigrants.
Yes.
You have the owners of bodegas and small businesses. I mean, they want to earn a profit because they want to be able to send their kids to college. They want to run their business. They want to have a safe city. I mean, you don't want some guy who's in favor of, closing Rikers and letting people out of jail, who are going to go and terrorize your small business. So it becomes a headache for you to try to even go to the bank at night to make your night deposit, because it's going to be the Wild West all over again. The guy who wants to reduce the present police force from its current 33,000 officers to probably 30,000 in order to have another 5,000 or so social workers to do his law enforcement interventions that he thinks cops shouldn't be doing. Those are the things that the opposition, whether they coalesce around one candidate or not, those are the issues they have to raise the voter interest of those who sat out the primary, or those who couldn't vote in the primary because they're not registered Democrats. They have to be activated around issues that are important to them. And the issues we know that he's not, that he's going to be a danger around. I mean, he's not talking about trying to fix the property tax system. He just wants to tax, wealthier people more. Well, that's not going to help the Caribbean American homeowner in the Bronx, or the Asian homeowner in Queens who is dealing with this unequal property tax system. He's not looking to provide relief for store owners who have to compete against illegal vendors.
Vendors, yeah.
They got to pay overhead. They got to pay rent. They get fined by sanitation for having a dirty sidewalk or a dirty curb, and the vendor who's probably contributing to some of that filth gets off scot-free. That's not fair, and that's what has to go out and resonate among those voters. Yes, his anti-Semitism is horrible, and I think people who are concerned about that are aware of it, and I think they'll be motivated to be out there. We also have to give the other side of what he's proposing and how that's going to be harmful to other New Yorkers who have an interest in having a city that's livable, and for those who've experienced socialism and communism in their home countries, understanding where that leads to. And then those Democrats who care about trying to win back, who want to win back the House and want to win back the presidency in 2018, can't have this lunatic running New York City into the ground. I mean, the DSA was looking forward to gaining control of the center of American, if not world, capitalism to set their flag.
Yeah.
And I'm of the view that we should not let that happen. Yes, they're organized, they're smart, they're doing a much better job than their grandparents and parents that I knew in the 80s. They definitely have grown beyond them. It's because, when I was a college student, my friends wanted to be libertarians. Flash forward 50 years later, they all want to be socialists.
But I do think, if I may just say a few words, I do want to go back to the fact that we're looking at 5% of the voters in New York that voted for this, and it doesn't represent the mainstream. And I think that the biggest problem we face is that the media, as soon as he won, jumped on this as this is some big broad mandate, when I think the market being and the numbers that he got clearly show that Mandami was speaking to a youthful audience, 24 to 30 years old, that he was able to activate. He's basically a former rapper with a very good social media presence and what many people say is very smile. and he has a very engaging way of speaking. He has these big rallies, but again, I think that the fact that he's representing what people want in terms of change is now becoming uh, this movement uh, with all these electeds jumping on the bandwagon and the unions endorsing him, all in this major wave to try to make power for themselves and create or keep the power, grow the power for the DSA. When I don't think that's what the public really wants, and whether we can deliver those of us who don't agree that he should be the next mayor, whether we can activate voters to come out and vote against him. I think you, Yatin, and Mona have made great arguments as to all the things we have to do and all the things we have to say. But we also need the cooperation of thinkers in the media who are going to wake up and be adults about this, as well as others who are running in this race right now, so that we can stop this from ridiculous thing happening. I think about wokeism and how many pundits said wokeism was dead, and all the reasons why it was. Yet here we are with a candidate who clearly wants to defund the police. Like, didn't we kind of bury that idea that defunding the police was a good thing? I think we kind of all came to the conclusion that that was a losing argument for any candidate in any side of the spectrum to make. That no one, we basically ruined our police force in New York, where the vast majority of New Yorkers are very concerned about their ability to activate police help when they're involved in a crime, because the police have to check with 5 layers of management and make sure that what they're doing is okay and permitted. So, and we had all these rallies around the city, where just today someone told me that she was at a rally, a Palestinian rally against Israel, and she was knocked over by 3 protesters, a woman a little bit older, and she said, the police basically said, nothing I can do to help you, ma'am. Sorry. I was given instructions on top to stand down, stand back, and do nothing. And I can't imagine someone with Madami's politics, someone who from a very early age has been screaming, from the river to the sea and all these other phrases. He's clearly part of the group that has, trying to, reverse and basically eliminate Israel as a country for much of his adult life. So it's very hard to imagine him as head of New York's police department. But one point I really want to go back to, which Michael mentioned, and Mona and Yatin, is his character, and what kind of a leader he is as a 33-year-old. I mean, I'm the mother of 3 Gen Z people, and I'm used to younger people in my house with moods and all the behaviors of young people. But like, his character is of great concern to me, just in terms of like his core character. Like, for example, he I posted something on X which he didn't like, and that was a political commentary about one of his rallies. It was pretty innocuous. I felt that, I don't like sort of his presentation toward women. I think that there's this cult vibe that he has, where he gets a lot of young people to kind of go along with him. He hid the fact he was married for many months. He, is from a very wealthy Ugandan family, and he had this lavish multi-million-dollar wedding in Dubai. He hid it from the public. At the same time, he was, presenting himself to all these young people in Bushwick and other neighborhoods in Brooklyn. And I sort of called him out for, like, wait, what's happening here? Didn't like that he was asking women in particular to wear scarves on their heads, handkerchiefs, basically. And, I mean, it was my right as an American citizen to say what I want. And he has a much bigger uh, reach than I do, in the many millions. And so he posted my tweet on a video, and it got millions of people. And I was actually afraid for my safety because I had to block 200 people. And so it's that kind of like judgment that, you know, he should have just let my comment go. Like, does he have to come after me? And I've heard this from other people as well, that he goes after you. And in fact, when he was accused of being anti-Semitic, he did this press conference where he started crying and saying, everybody's calling me an anti-Semite and my feelings are really hurt. And it's like embarrassing, really. Like, we're all got to grow our skin a little bit thick just to get through the day in New York. And instead, we've got a mayor who goes after, you know, women for saying something he doesn't like uh, in a way that could put them in danger. Uh, and when he's in a position to be on the receiving end of something, he cries like a baby. So, like, I'm just wondering about his character. So, you're all talking about big picture stuff. I appreciate that, and how we're going to move forward in this current environment, how we're going to deal with the fact that he won't renounce globalizing product and all of that. On a micro level, just in terms of his character, I'm deeply, deeply concerned. And I think if more people in the media and in the public knew just how he is in the world, it would give them a better understanding of how he's going to lead the city. And then one other point I want to make is how he's going to work with our city council. So Eric Adams, for 4 years, has been on the receiving end of terrible, terrible attacks from Adrian Adams and others, um, who just seems to, uh, relish constantly going after Eric. And it's been 4 years of this. And it's been tiring to those of us who've been watching City Council. Eric has been trying to kind of be the adult in the room and be rational and reasonable. And it's just been really hard for him. And so I'm just wondering if Madami wins and he's got City Council that's really ruled by the far left progressives, we don't have any kind of check and balance here in the legislature, um, and that's really really concerning. Even if you look at the limited powers that a mayor has, I think if it's the city council plus the mayor can do a lot of damage. I can think of a lot of things that the mayor can do, starting with charter revision. I mean, the mayor has the ability to put reforms on for charter revision on the ballot. So there could be some really big things that the mayor and the city council can push that could really move us into a very dangerous place. So I'm concerned about that. And I just want to say, like, it's not over. I think we have to continue to keep the pressure on our mainstream Democratic leadership, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, Governor Hochul, Senator Gillibrand, as well as Congressman Swosey, and then our local leaders who haven't endorsed him, to continue to hold the line here, and let's rally behind a candidate who is going to be a much better representative from every perspective than this candidate who ran a good race but took advantage of a particular moment um, that that allowed him to get into this position of being the Democratic nominee. But I don't think it's over. But it is going to take a lot of discipline from a lot of people to just say no, we're not going to have this.
Maria, I got to say that in reference to your last point, um, there is no Democratic cavalry coming.
Right.
We're on our own. Chuck
That's right.
Schumer is not going to stand up. We already see Gillibrand folding. Uh, we've seen Gillibrand fold. We've seen the Senate Majority Leader Andrew Stewart Cousins fold. We saw over the weekend, Attorney General James was arm in arm with Mamdani marching in the Pride Parade. The public advocate is a fellow traveler with Mamdani and Lander. There are no adult normal Democrats who are coming to our rescue. If we're going to win this thing, we're going to win it on our own, and we're going to be the ones to figure out who to coalesce around. The problem we have, and the fact that Eric didn't run in a Democratic primary, shows that he has no political capital to spend in this independent run. I don't want to be sanguine, but that's just a fact. Um, when he was at the post editorial board meeting, I asked him about did he think had he reached out to Byron Brown in Buffalo.
Mhm.
Byron Brown, had lost the Democratic primary to a Democratic socialist in Buffalo,
Mhm.
India Walden. But because he had a strong relationship with Democratic Party regulars in Erie County, they were able to galvanize together and to reelect him as a write-in candidate, which is next to impossible to do in ordinary elections. But as another writer recently in the Post pointed out, well, Buffalo is Erie County. A lot of Buffalonians rely on the county and the party for their employment. So it's quite easy to move 38,000 voters into the column of the incumbent mayor who is aligned tightly with the Erie County Democratic Party. Eric Adams doesn't have that. I mean, I was most shocked that his Brooklyn Democratic leader, Rodney Bishot Hermelin, said that she would be backing Mamdani because he won the primary.
It was a fast one.
That's not the Democratic Party that I grew up in. We stand with our guys against the socialists.
Right.
Well, that's not the party that now in power across the 5 boroughs. I understand Staten Island has already folded and joined Brooklyn in pledging their support to the Saracen King. Um, so we're going to be on our own in figuring out who's going to be the candidate that's going to be supported. I suspect that Andrew Cuomo is going to drop out, but he's going to do what he did to Carl McCall when he was running for governor and he lost the Democratic primary, but he's still running as a Liberal Party candidate. He didn't pledge himself to Carl McCall until Labor Day.
Yeah.
A few months before the election. I believe he's going to do the same thing to Eric Adams. He's going to withdraw, but it won't be until Labor Day. He'll still be on the ballot with this minor party, but he's not going to leave the field until then. He's going to spend the entire summer making people think, trying to get him to run or to put money in his campaign. And it's important that, we put this out to the public and to the party leaders and the donors that this guy is not going to go anywhere. He's going to try to run this thing out as he did when he ran against Carl McCall. Then he's going to withdraw from the field and leave Eric Adams in a position where he still has to scramble. But I think Eric ought to be smart enough to recognize that and to really organize. He's been doing some shady stuff himself and trying to get Republicans to coalesce with him. I understand he's been telling some Republican leaders and donors that President Trump was lining up a job for Curtis Sliwa in Washington. And when I was first told that, I was like, what? When did Curtis die? Because that's the only way he's leaving the field for this election. And, I found out that he did tell the New York Post that yeah, I'm not leaving unless I'm dead. I'm not leaving. I'm not giving up this race.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Curtis or Eric. They're the ones. They're the choice, and that's what has to be decided upon by voters and those who have the biggest voice, and they've got to focus on the issues that are important to New Yorkers. Yes, of course, affordability, the things that you can actually accomplish as mayor, but also the things that you're afraid this guy is going to do to make life even more miserable for New Yorkers, because all socialism brings to advanced countries like us is misery. Because when you want to, as somebody said, in his desire to get rid of billionaires, his desire for equality is to make us all equally poor and miserable, and that's not what New Yorkers want. We want to have the opportunity, to be successful, for our children to go to quality high schools, for our children to go to quality schools and get quality educations. That's what we want, and that's what the persons who are running for mayor and are going to be the counterweight to him must begin to plug and to make known to voters and figure out a way to get those voters out. Yeah, if TikTok helps, fine. But many of the voters who are going to be voting against him will be folks 40 to 60. They're the ones you have to motivate. They're the ones you got to bring to the polls. And we know they're not going to stay home because of the heat in November, because it won't be that warm. So they can be motivated to come out there. But you've got to put together a campaign that makes them enthusiastic for your candidacy to save New York, for your crusade to stop the Saracen King.
I mean, I think there's going to be some of the, fear aspects of this can be a very double-edged sword. When Trump ran, a lot of the campaign was about, the Democrats nonstop saying that, the end of democracy and be fascist and all of that and destroy everything. And, that's not coming true to at least most of his base doesn't see that he's done anything. Many people in America continue to support him, and he has very high approval ratings. So I think we have to be careful with the negativity. And I'm also thinking, I think it's like de Blasio was a socialist, and he did so much damage, but that was kind of under the surface that, like, the average New Yorker didn't necessarily see. But he was doing just tremendous damage, cutting budgets for the police and bringing in all kinds of mayo to local neighborhoods, like safe injection sites, things like that he approved. A lot of projects he approved. And, my concern is that big economy like New York, Madami could get away with doing a lot of damaging things for a few years before the bottom falls out. And it's not going to be so apparent to people, especially if it gives away some free stuff at the beginning, the first year or two, that what it is he's doing is really going to hurt the city, long term. And then there's another issue we didn't really talk about, which is exodus from New York, and the fact that the post-COVID world, people have the ability to pick up and go elsewhere, and they will. Taxes start going up and quality of life goes down, which it has come. I mean, I'm a Manhattan resident. This is nowhere near the borough was 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 12 years ago. It's really not an easy place to live. It's extremely, a lot of disarray, a lot of chaos, mentally ill people, a lot of homeless. You can't go out to dinner. It just doesn't have the quality of life it always had. And, more and more people are choosing to vote with their feet. And I think that's going to be a trend that's going to pick up as well as if the tax base chooses to relocate. And there's also an aging tax base with New York, where if you're over a certain limit, you're going to pay a lot of state taxes. And, I think wealthier people are going to say, I'm just going to fold and move about. And I think we are going to lose a lot of the tax base. And there's someone not going to be able to cover that up. The gaslighting we used before, they're really, really good at gaslighting. So I think it's going to be hard to see all the harm, as opposed to if we can elect a candidate who has very pro-growth ideas to restore New York's economy, raise the quality of life, raise the standard of living by raising wages, and attracting more businesses to New York City and New York State that are going to create more high-paying jobs. Like, we're not hearing anybody actually say any of those things, which I think we really need. And I think that would be a very refreshing thing for Adams, if he's the one that we all get behind, to really say that, we're not just looking at addressing all the things the socialists are talking about, but we're also talking about a positive message of growth and potential realized opportunity more specialized high schools, not fewer, uh, more merit-based economic opportunities, all the things that make people want to live here. So, I hope that it's not just a, you know, negative campaign that's going to do the trick here, but that we really get a leader who's going to bring us some, hope in a direction that's going to bring New York back.
Eric's going to have to show, the positive of what he's accomplished
Mhm.
as mayor and how he's made life that much better for New Yorkers, particularly the ones whose votes he needs. I'm not quite sure if he's done that precisely, but he's got to put it in terms that are easily, as I said, digestible by the voters that he needs to win. And he also has to use facts that can't be disputed. Um, Mamdani supporters love to use unfactual things uh, in their campaign. I mean, I was on again. I keep referring to Twitter and X, but Public Advocate Jumani had an X post today saying that rents were at historic levels. Well, that's patently untrue. Rents are actually lower than they've been before, if you account for inflation. But people who are innumerate have no idea what inflation is and how to count it, and so he can make this statement on Twitter and they're going to buy it. In actuality, rents have gone up slower than inflation, while landlord costs have gone up greater than inflation, and rents are up tremendously than they were in 1970. I mean, rents have not gone up. They're actually almost relative to the cost of rent in 1970 today is almost what rents are right now. If you use the inflation calculator, so rents really aren't at historic levels. They're actually at about the same level over the last 50 years. But it's the landlord costs that have gone up, and it's something that socialists and others who want to exploit the issue aren't willing to tell voters. I mean, and understanding that there are two things that have harmed housing supply. It's not the cost that's been the great harm, it's the regulations and the laws that have made it almost impossible for landlords to want to have apartments on the market, to take their apartments that need renovation and repair, to do those repairs because they aren't able to recoup the cost by charging a higher rent to cover their costs. And that's pure and simple economics. But too many of our young people are illiterate when it comes to economics and numbers. And all they want to hear is what's in it for me. Well, yeah, at one time, I'll say when I was younger, I thought rent control was great. But then I actually went to graduate school, understood the situation, got a better knowledge of economics, to be like, oh, geez, rent control makes the situation worse. It lowers the housing supply. And it was a professor at Hunter College that opened my eyes. You go to Hunter now, you're not going to hear that from a Hunter professor about rent control and how it's damaging. They're all going to tell you it's the greatest thing since apple pie. And that's not what a really literate, civically minded electorate needs to hear when they're growing and need to get the facts and understand them. And then, it's, I've been trying to figure out how to say this. One of the reasons why these dozen or so DSA members in the legislature have gotten so powerful is because of their allies. Their allies in the legislature are black and Hispanic leaders. It's not white people that are pushing this in the legislature. It's people like John Liu. It's Bichette. It's Walker. It's some of the guys in the Bronx. They've
Yep.
been helping to lay the foundation for this for years. And they've made it okay. So the few dozen DSAers in the legislature, yeah, they're able to get their way because the members of the Black and Hispanic caucus are actually in their corner. And yes, minority communities have had a hard time with the police in New York and around the country, but not to the extent where you want to do away with cops because the victims of crime are other black and Hispanic people. They're the ones that you should be looking out
Yes.
to protect. And the police department, as over the last 15, 20 years, has gotten more Black and Hispanic and Asian
Mhm.
than in the previous 50. So these aren't the same cops. These are
Mhm.
folks who joined the police force because they want to make a difference in their community. So they're not going to be stopping somebody who's driving because he or she is Black, or because they're Puerto Rican, or because they're Asian. They are going to stop them because the law requires them to protect people. And that's what we've gotten away from it. And we're not calling out our fellow Black, Hispanic, and Asian legislators who've been working against our interests, which is quite absurd. And now and we're wondering why they're not standing up to Mamdani and the DSA, because they've been their accomplices, much like Governor Cuomo was their accomplice for the last 5 years
Mhm.
of his tenure as governor. The miserable laws that we've been complaining
Mhm.
about, he signed into law when he lost his IDC Republican majority to be the bulwark against the crazies in the assembly and the Democrats in the state Senate. He just went along with the program because he wanted to protect himself and he wanted to run for president.
Yeah.
And he wanted to be the progressive guy running for president out of New York. Well, guess what, Mr. Andrew Cuomo? You screwed us all. And now we've got to figure out how to push these people back. And we've got to call out the fellow, the John Lews, the Jamani Williams, the Sepulvedas, the Walkers, the
Mhm.
Bichette Hermelins, who have been accessories to the devastation of New York.
No, I agree, and I just want to close with one thing. We are speaking about policies, and yeah, we need to really scrutinize all of the candidates: Zoran, Eric, um, Andrew, Sliwa, Jim Walden, um, Irina Schroeder, first Latina running for first Latina. Okay, wait. Let's give my props because she's my friend. So Irina Strada, for those who don't know, is the first Latina running on a major political party line for mayor in New York City's history, and she's running on the Conservative Party line. And I'm sure she's going to have a lot to say. But we do have an issue with coverage of the mayoral candidates. And the media is the media, and that's why it's really important um, to engage ethnic and community media outlets, neighborhood media, because they know what's going on in their communities. But coming back to the policies, it, media didn't really scrutinize Zoran. He's had an extensive honeymoon. They haven't been talking about his position on defunding the police, and they need to. He's not going to increase the number of police. We have a shortage of police officers, but no one is talking about that. But, you know, he wants more social workers. But today, he has an NYPD security detail. He doesn't have social workers protecting him. He has the same NYPD that he wants to defund. Like, hello, hypocrite, anyone? Um, but it's his policies, it's the policies of all of them. But we really need to scrutinize his position and others' positions on things that matter to us. And I'm not sure where he stands on it, on this last policy that I want to close out with Yatin, because I think she's the most familiar with it. But, City of Yes was so divisive,
Yeah.
and like, guess what? Whoever is the next mayor, what are they going to do with City of Yes? So, I mean, Yatin, I, we can close with that. Which mayoral candidates supported City of Yes? Who did not support City of Yes? And do you think City of Yes is going to become a mayoral campaign issue? Because to be honest with you, it really should, in my
Yes,
humble
I
opinion.
think it is. I think it is, and certainly in Queens, and most of the community boards in Queens voted against City of Yes. and it still went through. I think this one size fits all, and that's something that a lot of people who were opposed to it was talking about, is there are absolutely areas where people want more development. They welcome it, and they can have it. They can have it. But there are also places in Northeast Queens and Southeast Queens. We're talking about a very racially diverse group of people that are homeowners, that have put their life savings in their homes, and they don't want to see many apartment buildings, on their block, and they want to protect the quality of life. And I think if Eric wants a shot at maybe getting those people, and right now they're swinging to Curtis Sliwa. They really do not see anyone else. I think Cuomo was a little bit softer on the city of yes. He wasn't super hard, but he also wasn't having conversations with a lot of these community. I think we really didn't know where he stood. Let me put it that way. So if Eric is going to be the candidate, he needs to win some of these people back. And I think it's winnable if he says, look, I want to build, and I'm going to prioritize and start with the neighborhoods that want it, and at least give the messaging that he's going to not touch certain areas that just don't want it. It is going to be, Mona, I think City of Yes is a election issue. I think education, the specialized high school will be an election issue. Defund the police will be an election issue. The globalize the intifada for the Palestine will be an issue. So all of these things are going to have different constituents that put it as their number one. And whoever we coalesce around needs to understand that they need to manage all of that. Just as, Zoran and Donnie have been able to gloss over and not be put at task with all the issues that he's been talking about for the primary. I think it will get harder for November. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much for having this forum.
No, thank you. Thank you guys for joining me today and talking about this. I just thought it was important that we have a conversation about it, looking at the unofficial ranked choice voting results, but also, to put kind of give notice to the candidates on what matters to New Yorkers and some positions of different constituency groups, because clearly, and I'll say this for all of the candidates, they don't engage all communities. They have their preferences where they're more comfortable, or communities that they think matter more than the others. And all communities matter here in New York City. So, again, thank you. I know I'm looking forward to having more on the spots as things heat up over the summer. As all I know is I know Eric and Zoran are going to be crisscrossing the city. And, Zoran may be 33 years old, but I can guarantee you Eric is probably more healthier and has more stamina than Zoran. And he knows how to campaign. So, yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting, and I'm looking forward to speaking to the different candidates, doing Meet the Candidates. And, the other thing that I think it's also important is that we hear from New Yorkers. So, let's see how New Yorkers feel about how the campaigns are progressing over the summer. But guys, thank you so very much. Thank you for joining me here on the spot talking about it. And, I hope you guys will be back soon. Maybe we're going to be the the regular on the spot people. Something like that. Different perspectives, different boroughs, different communities. That's what it is. So again, thank you so very much for your time and your keen insight on New York City's political landscape. And Michael, Boy, your institutional history is something else. We learn every time.
Great.
I'm cursed with some political memory.
Yes, yes, yes. That is true. So thank you all. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Mona. Thank you for the
Thank you.
opportunity.
It's great.
Bye, everyone.
Good
All
night.
right, bye bye.